Hey guys, it's Temple from Temple Beautiful. So today I want to give you the top 10 things that you should know before you have a channeling session. And this isn't specific, this is very generalized. This is just stuff that I have learned along the way. So let's delve in session. And if you're new to the whole channeling, not everybody channels the same. So some people channel where they have, automatic writing. Other people channel where they just hear or see what the beings are explaining to them, and then they interpret it. Others allow the beings to talk for them. And there's a lot of ways of doing it. And so if you haven't signed up for a session, I want to give you guys pointers that might help you have a more successful session. It doesn't matter who you sign up with or who you go to for these sessions. So this is just experiences that I've had. Number 10, when you are asking to channel with someone who has had a relatively well-known life here on Earth, okay? I'm going to use Michael as an example just because we chat a lot. You have to be aware that that channel can possibly bring in their feelings of said person into the channeling. So let me tell you a quick story about this. So when we were discussing this one day, and I said to Michael, every time I watch a channeling of you, which I try not to do because they always just annoy the heck out of me, everybody is like, oh, poor Michael, he's so sad, he's like miserable, and he's working on things and blah blah blah. And that's not the way that you and I talk. You and I talk like we're just having a great time, and everybody else has a different perspective of you. Why is that? He said sometimes when channel beings where they've had experiences here on Earth where a lot of people thought they knew them or had a specific perspective of them. So for example, a lot of people have sadness when it comes to Michael for, going so soon, and also his childhood and just, and so they channel that into the channeling. So even if they bring him through, on top of that, you have a layer of this personal sadness coming from this channeler, and that is going to come through on the channeling. Okay, so you really need, and this goes in with number 8 on how clear the channel is. You really need a channel that doesn't have any ties to the entity or the being that is being channeled. And it's hard because, everybody knew about Michael's music. Everybody, read the papers, read the tabloids, or whatever. So it's hard not to form an opinion or not to have personal feelings, especially when you're feeling, sad or sorry for them or things like that. Just be aware that channelers can accidentally channel this into the being that is being channeled, when really that's not the way it is at all. Like, he's fine. Everything's great. Like, he hangs out with his loved ones. It's fine. But a lot of times it doesn't come across that way in other people's channelings of him. So just be aware of that if you are having a celebrity channeled or a famous person from history. There are certain aspects that will be attached to them just because that's what the channeler's belief system is of that person, or that is how the channeler feels about that person. So it has nothing to do with you. That's part of why you need to make sure the channeler is very clear, and we talk about that coming up. So let's move on. Number 9, what are the channel strengths? And it seems kind of specific. Like, if you want to learn about your past experiences, you don't want to channel who's really focused on the here and now, or you don't want to channel who's focused on the galactic world, like, unless you want to know your past galactic experiences. But it's a very specific subject, and so it will help you to know exactly what you're looking for and find a channel that focuses within those areas. Number 8, how clear is that channel? When we sign up with whomever for channeling, we want to make sure that we've heard of this channel before, obviously, that we feel connected to this channel, and that we've really thought about and kind of meditated on, is this the best channel for us? Because from my experience, there was a channeler who I was super excited to get a session with, and I felt connected to this person. But at the same time, when I was actually having this session, it was so strange. The connection totally wasn't there. And what I thought would be the best for me in that moment actually wasn't. This person was getting names confused. I would ask her specific questions, and the answers would be kind of snotty. It was just a mess. It was a mess. And so, you don't always know. A lot of people think, oh, well, if you're channeling, you're up here, and like little old me, I'm down here. But that's not the case. Like, all channelers go through, their peaks and their valleys, because they're human, just like us. We're human, right? We're in human bodies. And so you don't always know what they're personally dealing with at that moment. Some channels don't need to focus very much on it. It's just very natural. They don't need to eat a specific way or, meditate a specific way. But other channels do. Other channels have to have a specific diet. They definitely do a lot of meditation. And so there's a lot of different ways of going about this. Just make sure that channel, that you feel connected to that channel, and that channel is the best channel for you in that moment. Okay. Number 7, how open are you? So this is something that I've realized along the way, especially in the beginning, where there were so many things I was interested in and so many things were coming up on a daily basis, where I wanted to have sessions to talk about specific topics, but it almost wasn't that time, where the beings that I was having channeling sessions with, they had other plans for me of things to teach me and to learn in that session. So don't be worried if, you have a specific topic, but they have a different topic that they want to talk about. It happens. And really, the beings that normally are being channeled a lot of times are your loved ones. They're pieces of you. They're, friends from past and present. They're people you have connections with, right? Or they're people you're interested in. And so they're always looking out for your highest good. And so don't be surprised sometimes if the topic changes, and that's an okay thing. They're there for your highest good in that moment. And it's really up to you to be open to accept that. Because if you're really upset that, you wanted to speak about your past lives and they wanted to speak about what was going on now and how you're handling it and maybe better ways to handle the situation or whatever, don't be upset at that. Take that as a learning experience, because it just wasn't time. It wasn't time. And so number 6, giving you half the story. So this is something that I've been coaching a lot of people in. And this goes along with number 5 of asking your questions very specifically. So giving you half the story. So in the beginning of my channeling experiences, when I would go to channels, I would say, how come I feel like I was a stork dropped off? And they would say, oh, that's because you were born on a ship. And you're very galactic. You have a lot of galactic DNA, more so than normal humans. I was like, okay, that's cool. Like, that answers that question, right? I always had like this separation from this Earth, from Earth. I always had a separation from like being human, and it's been quite the adventure for me to accept my humanness and to really enjoy being human. So it made total sense. Like, I didn't ask. They're talking about galactic DNA and my, other family members, galactic family members. And so I never thought to ask any more questions about it. Well, come to find out, just recently, the ship isn't the ship that we all think the ship is. And this is part of giving you half the story, because I needed that part of the story. They're not lying. I was born on a ship. But had they given me the full story, it probably would have blown my mind at that time, and I wouldn't have been able to function. So I've had sessions like that where they do this to prove a point. This one time I was told to stop focusing on like the galactic world. Like I need to be in my human world, right? So I had this session lined up and I was like, okay, fine. Like I'll do it. I'll ask all kinds of questions about my past experiences. And I did that, and they gave me exactly what I asked for. And they did it to prove a point that there comes a point when they can give you too much information that it kind of blows your mind and you're just tapped out for days, and you just kind of like are trying to process all this information, and it's really hard. And so I learned my lesson that not to get upset if they're only giving me half the story, or they're only giving me what I need in that moment. So I'm going to tell you guys the story about the ship. It's not going to happen just yet, but it will come. And if you're following along with my experiences, when I first started this channel, I give you like the synopsis up until that moment, right? That now. And it kind of proceeds, there's a couple videos, and you can see all my experiences and how I've progressed in learning about who I am, and how those ideas that I had in the beginning have really changed as I've grown to know myself. But I needed those to get me where I was. If they gave me the ideas here that I now know and put them over here, it would have been way too mind-blowing for me to understand. So there is a time and a place for everything. So if you want the full story, you have to think on your feet. Prepare your questions ahead of time, but also listen. A lot of times what I feel like when I have channeling sessions, and usually it's good friends of mine that have passed on and are on the other side that I'm talking with, and at that moment, they're connecting to your energy and you're connecting to their energy. And it's this really wonderfully magical feeling of just being connected, right? And so when they're talking to you, I'd like to think that I'm listening really well and that I can fire back with questions based off what they just told me. But I just can't. I'm just so in that moment that I can't think ahead enough to ask those questions. And then later I watch the recording and I'm like, oh my gosh, like I should have been on the ball and asked those questions. So prepare stuff ahead of time. You don't have to use it, but at least you can think through properly what specific questions you're going to ask. Now, along with those specific questions that you're asking, remember to word them in such a way that they know that you're talking about your here, your now, or that you're talking about an experience on such and such a timeline. Because when they're looking at you and they're giving all this information to you, they're looking at your oversoul. They're looking at the big picture, right? You're looking at the small picture. And that's kind of the difference between the two worlds. Right? And so you need to kind of guide the questions in specific so they can give you the best information that they're allowed to give you. So also, number 4, wrong interpretations. Now, remember, when you are working with a channeler, if that channeler is one of the channelers who hear and see things, but they're not allowing the entity in to be able to speak for him or herself, they have to interpret. Okay, and sometimes they get it wrong. So let me give you an example. I was gifted a reading a long time ago, and I felt really connected to this woman. And it turns out the connection was for the wrong purposes, but that's another story. So I was really connected to this woman, and I thought at that time, she was really spot on. She was like putting together all my experiences that I never told her I had. And she knew my past experiences. And she sort of blew me out of the water. But then there was one thing that she said that bothered me. And this was when I was really starting to learn about my experience during the Ramses II period in Egypt. And she said something like, you went behind Ramses' back to preserve the divine feminine. Something like that. Like, that's just the gist of it. And she's talking about like him, like, and war and like blah, blah, blah. And like, we all know, we know that like he fought a lot of wars, right? And anyway, we're not going to get into that. So I held this, and it didn't resonate with me, but a portion of it made me nervous. Like, what if this is the actual thing that happened? But there was something in me that just kept, like, this little inner voice that kept saying, this isn't sitting well. There's more to it than this. Something's wrong. And so when I finally fully understood that connection, I had a session with Ramses, right? And we talk all the time now, actually. I don't need a channeler to talk to him. But I asked him about this. And I said, so I don't really see you as that, the way she described you. And I'm not really understanding why I would ever go behind your back. And like, it just doesn't make sense to me. And he said to me that when channelers are getting all this information and they're having all these pictures and these words and they're trying to put it together, they're trying to fit that missing puzzle piece in to put it together, they can get it wrong sometimes. And it's not that they're a bad channeler, it's that they misinterpreted the symbols, the signs, the whatever they were given. And so he explained it to me as, in ancient Egypt, when he ruled, you have the sun and the moon. So the sun is the pharaoh and the moon is the wife, the queen. And it's this balance of masculine and feminine. And so when the sun sets, the moon comes up. So it looks like, okay, so we'll do it this way. So, we'll do it this way. So if the sun sets, right? So here's the sun. Then the moon comes out. It does look like the moon is, the moon is going behind the sun's back, right? So she didn't quite get it right. But it was all about equal balancing of equal masculine and feminine. And he explained to me how like the feminine needs to be there. There's no way that one could try and deplete the other, because there has to be that balance. And it was just really interesting how he explained this all to me. So be aware of that. They can get the interpretation wrong. They're not always 100% correct. And that's where you need to know yourself well enough to either hang on to it, to dismiss it and never think about it again, or to like pack it away and maybe it would come out later, Okay. Number 3. So past loved ones interfering. So this is like one of the best ones ever. So when we have a session, a channeling session, we are really excited, right? And we have all these questions prepared and all these ideas, and we're really wanting to know all kinds of information, either about us or a situation or how things connect from the past to the present. And sometimes your loved ones can interfere without them knowing that they're interfering. So let me give you an example of how I found this out. So when I was trying to learn about all of my past Egyptian experiences, because there was a lot of them, and one of the things I do sometimes is I get timelines messed up and crossed and whatever, like just trying to unravel everything has been really interesting and quite the adventure for myself. So when you're with a channel and you want them to like help you with this unraveling of all your experiences in Egypt, and the channeler comes back and says, you were this woman named Tezereptet, okay? And I was like, oh, okay. And you can tell, you guys, if it feels right to you or not. If you feel connected to that, because names carry vibrations. If you were that name, like you would have that same vibration, so you would be connected. And at the time I was like, okay, like I'm learning, like I'm open. I'm not going to say no, but I'm not going to like dwell on it. So, and that's the thing with channeling sessions. That's the thing with any sessions. If anybody's giving you information, just take it with a grain of salt, right? You're going to build on that information. That information is not the end all be all, unless you really feel that way. But things can change. Just like I said, the whole ship changing, once you get more of the pieces of the puzzle put together. So, okay, so here we go. So once I was then speaking to my loved one who has passed over, and I was talking to him, and we were talking about our experiences in ancient Egypt together. And I said that I wanted to know, like, if we were together in any of the experiences, like, was I your servant, things like that. And so we're talking, and he's like, well, I thought I was so-and-so when I was here on Earth, but then I get over here and I'm like, wait a minute, no, now I know that I was Tezareptet, and I was a queen, but I didn't live very long. I got sick, and I was like, whoa, wait a minute. This is the connection that I was missing, that it didn't really sit well with me that they said that I was this Tezareptet person, but I hung on to it knowing that at some point it would come out. And I said, what's the deal? Like, why did that channeler get the two mixed up? Because I totally don't feel it, and I feel it for you, so I know it's you, And he started laughing, and he said, I was like waiting for this conversation to come up. I was standing next to you, like in spirit, all those years ago when you were having that session. And so our timelines and our energies, because they're similar, got crossed. And I just thought, holy crap, like that's pretty amazing. Like that's really amazing. And so you have your loved ones around you all the time, right? Like you don't think about it. We don't think about it. I talk a lot to my loved ones and stuff, but you don't think about them like standing or sitting. Sometimes I can see them sitting in chairs and stuff or whatever, but normally it's more of a feeling or something you don't even think about. Let alone like having this channeling session, being so excited to discover you, and then having your loved ones' energy, interference, and timelines cross over. And so the channeler wouldn't know this, because if your energies are similar, it's very easy to get mixed up. So something else to just keep in mind, okay? All right, so number 2, timeline jumps and fractals. All right, so we're gonna talk about timeline jumps first. And we've mentioned this a little bit. What happens when you're over here and you're seeing the small picture, and they're over there and they're seeing the big picture? You're not aware of all the timeline jumps, because we're jumping timelines all the time. We have parallel timelines that we're doing. It's very confusing, and it makes asking questions a bit more difficult, because you want to make sure that they're reading you from this now, not from the now that you're having on the Palladian planet Maya. You don't want to read that now. You want to read this now, right? So it gets a little confusing, and this is how you have to be specific about your wording. I had a conversation with Ramses at one point, and I said something like, I feel like I'm not a good channel because I get these letters from my buddy, and he's talking to me about like royal Palladian stuff, and I'm not, like, that's not me in this timeline, and that's not me like on other timelines. So there's this disconnect, and I feel like I'm just not getting that now very well. I'm not connecting with that now. And he told me, he said, when you connect with different entities, different beings, different loved ones on the other side, sometimes those connections are stronger on a different timeline in a different now. And so they may be strong enough that when you're talking with them or connecting with them, that's the fractal piece that you're pulling from. This is very confusing, I know. And so he said, it's not that I'm a bad channel. He said, it's just unwrapping those timelines that you finally are able to recognize what is in this now and what is in a different now, and the fractal of the being that's coming through that you're pulling through from. So he said he's going to always see you as that way from that planet. There's going to always be, when he looks at you or when he feels your energy, he's going to feel that energy from that planet, because we had whatever big connection on that planet, or we did some big things, or whatever happened on that planet in that time, in that now. Does that make sense? That's also dealing with time jumps. When I'm writing a letter, and I am automatic writing, and I'm getting all this information, and then I check with my sources and do more automatic writing to get like the update on what's going on politically on the Mayan planet, and it doesn't really match up, then I know that at that moment in that time, yes, it matched up. But like in this now, in there now, in this there now, that's not what's going on. So that is really difficult to try to explain. And maybe someday we can make a video about timeline jumps and fractals. And I'm going to make a video about like the oversouls and fractals and stuff like that. So we're working on it. Also, when you're talking to your person that you're channeling and you say, hey, was I this person in a past life? Or they say, you were this person in a past life. I think it's really important to ask right away, was I a fractal of that person? Or was that person a fractal of me? And so you can weed that out right away, because most of the time what happens is that, and we just had this awesome conversation on the King Tut video about this, so check that out if you get a chance, is that a lot of times, especially in this now, we have a lot of really amazing beings here, but they don't always come in as just them. Like they split up. And so they fractalize themselves, and so they have other experiences and can help other people with their experiences. So for example, I always use Akhenaten. Akhenaten is a great example. He has many fractals. And we're going to talk about the number of fractals and all this stuff later. But he has a lot of fractals. And so a lot of times you'll hear people say, oh, I was Akhenaten in a past life. And really what they're saying, and it's most likely because they don't know, or they don't quite understand how this all works, is that they have a fractal of Akhenaten's memory in them. And so you're seeing it as if you were Akhenaten, because it becomes part of you after he puts that fractal in you. So always ask, just to make sure, like, was I actually this person, or was that person a fractal within myself at the time? We were just having this discussion of Sir Galahad. Galahad. And he had, don't quote me on this, I believe it was at that moment, in that now, he had like 7 fractals of other people in him that made up Sir Galahad, right? And that's another thing about like stories and you know, Robin Hood and stuff like that, but we can talk about that later. Beings can be made up of numerous fractals. And so when you get told that you're a specific person, always just double check about the whole fractals, because chances are they have a fractal of themselves in you, which is amazing because you can experience life from their perspective. You have those memories, and those memories help you in your now that you're experiencing. Otherwise, you know, they wouldn't have pieces. You wouldn't be borrowing pieces back and forth. So I hope that helps you guys. Let me know if you guys have any questions. I'm more than happy to answer them. And eventually we'll probably come up with more experiences, more things you guys should know about having your channeling sessions. And if you guys haven't had any channeling sessions, yeah, I think it's a really great experience to have. You just have to pick the right channel for you. And that's the first. If you guys can do that, then go through the list of the stuff we talked about and you'll be just fine. So I hope this has helped you guys, and I hope you guys are discovering who you are, because you are unique, you are beautiful. There's no one like you. Even if you have other fractals within you, you are creating a whole new experience. So it's amazing, it's needed, and you need to know who you guys are. That's so important for this journey here that we need to do on this planet for this time. So other than that, have a great day. Namaste. Blessings.